Hey guys, it's Dan. Welcome back. I have today another sponsored review from North Star, who I mentioned were kind enough to send me their most recent releases for Oathmark and Frostgrave to go over with you. So today what we have is their Orc Heavy Infantry, which is again a new release, and I think couples well with the regular Orc Infantry that I reviewed about a month ago. That was just a one sprue review. And because I'd like to show you sort of side by side some comparisons between those sets, so I thought that this would be a good one to dive into together. If you're not familiar with Oathmark, so Oathmark is the game that's produced by Osprey, and the miniatures for the game are produced by North Star. And North Star does such a good job. The aesthetic they've gone with for all, they've a pretty extensive fantasy range at this point, but the aesthetic is just beautiful. It really is rooted in history, medieval history, and much like I keep saying Peter Jackson's interpretation of Lord of the Rings, it really has like a real feel to it, even though we're dealing with fantasy subjects like orcs in this case. They also do a good job, and there's in-game impacts for this as well, but from a modeling standpoint, they have kits that sort of build on like a light, medium, heavy version of the same thing. So like the dwarves are the classic example where they literally have a light, regular, and then heavy dwarf infantry set, and the bits are all interchangeable between them, which is a modeler's dream. It's the same thing here. So they have the regular orc infantry and then the orc heavy infantry, which are going to be more heavily armored, as the name implies, and have more like shock infantry style weapons like pole arms. So the box art is fantastic, really, I think, compelling as ever. If it looks like I'm zoomed in, I'm not. This is actually my standard setup. It's just quite a thick box. And then on the back, you've got a shot of some completed miniatures, which is nice. Just an example of kind of how the miniatures go together, and then a little brief blurb on the Orc Heavy Infantry. So I think effective as ever in terms of overall box design. I've actually already taken the sprues out, so let me show you what the contents are. So 30 models to this kit. If I didn't mention that, all their sets come with 30 miniatures. You're going to end up with 6 sprues of 5 miniatures apiece. And then you get these Renadras, 3 of these sprues of 10 Renadra, these flat bases. These are 25mm squares, and that's true of all Oathmark sets, just so you're aware. Everything comes with a 25mm square base. It's nice that they've included those so everybody gets their own base. And then again, there's going to be 6 identical sprues of 5 models apiece. So let's just pick one of these out. So here's one sprue isolated. Before we dive in on the details, though, I did want to take a look at something here together, because we have a rare opportunity to look at 2 sprues side by side. So on the left, what we have is their standard Orc Infantry, which I again reviewed in a separate video. And on the right, this is their heavy infantry kit. And so all I wanted to point out here is that the overall size of the sprue is about the same. The layout's changed a little bit. You can see that the bodies are up at the top on this one. They're more toward the center here. And then the heads, instead of being on the top and bottom, on the heavy infantry set are in the middle, and then weapons kind of flanking them. So the layout's changed a little bit, but I think that has more to do with bits. And that's what I really wanted to point out, is just the sheer number of bits that is on this sprue. Again, there's some different weapon options, which confuses things a little bit. But overall, I think this is a step forward, building on what I thought was already a really fantastic kit in their standard Orc Infantry. But in terms of what you get in the box, I think it's really impressive. So let's take a look at the heavy infantry here. We're going to do some comparisons at the end. I'll assemble some of these. I'll assemble the standard Orc Infantry. I want to show you just how interchangeable they are in terms of the bits. So we'll do a quick overview shot here. Take a look at this. And yeah, I mean, already just beautiful from a sculpting standpoint. There's no flash on them, and that was my experience with the standard infantry as well. I've also dealt with their dwarves, and I've dealt with their goblins, and I've never had any production issues. Really crisp, clean details. So yeah, I mentioned the bodies are in the middle. You've got weapons flanking those, and then heads and some accessories on the far outside. So let's take a look at these bodies up close here, because you can probably already tell, if you're familiar with the Orc kit, that there's some aesthetic crossover between them, which makes perfect sense. But what they've done here is just added a bunch of armors. I also think that the poses are slightly more dynamic. And again, if I just pull in just briefly, you can see these poses are all excellent for orcs. No issues whatsoever, but they're comparatively more static, right? Whereas these are kind of in more lunging poses, which I think will couple nicely with some of the like pole arms, two-handed, I guess, great weapons. If you're a Warhammer player, you'll know what I'm talking about. But yeah, again, look at the sculpting on like all the scale armor they've included here. It looks like everybody's got some form of mail. And then you got greaves sculpted here, and then like plate greaves here. Plate greaves. So just, yeah, beautifully done. And pulling from, it's somewhat anachronistic, right? 'Cause you're pulling from different like parts of history. There's like some Dark Age looking armor to me, some full plate. So it's still very much fantasy, but it's like rooted in this idea that, as I said, these guys actually existed at some time. And then, like we saw in the Orc kit, you've got like kind of tattered clothing. There's some chips in the armor, which is all very well sculpted. So I think they're going to be a lot of fun to put together. In terms of heads, one thing that also jumps out at me is the standard Orc Infantry kit comes with 10 heads, which is fine. 10 heads per sprue, I should say. So 60 heads over that kit. But this has 14 heads. So instead of being a 2-to-1 ratio, like in the standard Orc Infantry set, this is almost a 3-to-1 ratio, which is excellent. Anything above a 2-to-1 ratio, I think, is very strong. And the advantage here, if we look at some of these, there's 7 on one side and 7 on the other. The interchangeability here between the kits, we'll take a look at. It just opens up so much. If you bought the standard Orc Infantry and the heavy Orc Infantry, the bits you could pull between the two sets is pretty staggering. So same thing here. Some of the heads are totally unarmored, which again, these would look great in the standard infantry set. Some kind of like tropey fantasy looking helmets, which are fun. And then you got some like standard, more like medieval looking helmets and armor, little like cap on that guy. So like all of these I think would be perfectly acceptable on the standard Orc Infantry set. You've got like more armored heads on this side, which almost just look like more heavier versions of the orc heads that came in the standard kit. This guy's got like a piece of metal face mask. Same thing, this guy's got like a metal visor here, but you can see the details all very crisp, very clean. Yeah, really excellently done. Let's look at arms, because there's quite a few of them in this set. So in sort of exchange for having 3 weapon option or variants in the standard infantry set, which are bows, spears, and hand weapons, this one only comes with 2. So you've got hand weapons, like regular hand weapons, which could be coupled with shields, and then you have 2-handed weapons, pole arms, great weapons, whatever you'd like to call them. However, there's more of them, which I like quite a bit. And we'll look in a second at the accessories, because those open up, I think, even more options for you. So let's look at standard hand weapons first. There are 9 of those, and they are found up here. There are 3 axes here. There's 1 axe down here. There's 2 swords or scimitars. They're here. And then you've got 1 mace that's in the right hand here, and then 1 left-handed mace. And then I skipped over here. There's 1 more sword or scimitar and 1 more mace. So as I said, this is the 10th hand weapon arm, but this is a left arm. So you could have a guy with a weapon in each hand if you'd like to do that. You then, of course, have a left arm. Actually, let me just look at some of the sculpting on these. I also like that all the design is different. So all of them are a little bit different from one another. Like every single weapon you can see is unique. Same thing up here. And then you have left arms. So there's a bunch down here. There's a bunch more up here. Yeah, so lots of left arm options. Again, 8 left arms per 5 bodies. No, 9 left arms per 5 bodies. So a huge number there, but what you can also see, I don't want to jump out of weapons yet, but there's accessories that we'll talk about in just a second that I think could be used in conjunction with some of these left arms as well. In terms of 2-handed weapons, pole arms, what have you, there are 6 of those per sprue. So you've got this one up here, these 2 here, which very much to me look historically inspired, like pole arms. You got these two kind of great axes here. And you've got this really wicked looking scimitar, which is actually a two-handed weapon. You can see there's the extra hand there. So you already really impressive kind of array of weapon bits. But then on top of that, you can see there's a lot of these like loose weapons that could either just be glued to the model, like on the belt, looking like they just stuffed some extra weapons, like 5 knives, so everybody can get a knife. There's like a loose mace. Again, there's axes and swords up there. So you could either just glue them to the model to make it look like they're, festooned with weapons, armed to the teeth if you're a Warhammer player. Or it seems like some of these are designed like you could cut the axe head off or place on one of the existing axe heads, or I think they could be glued in such a way that you make them pretty convincing as a additional like left-handed weapon. So anyway, it's great options for hobbyists. Kind of design them however you want. So yeah, huge number of weapons. You've got some command bits down here. You've got what's like a standard that goes with this. And then the shields kind of rounded out here. You've got 5 shields, which again are slightly different in terms of aesthetics. You've got 4 up here, 1 down here, but they're rounded with a rounder boss. Whereas on the standard Orc Infantry, there's a mix of like crescent shapes, half moon shapes, and they all have this spiky boss. Which again is cool because if you pick up these 2 boxes to kitbash with one another, you can blend the shields between the sets if you like. Choose which ones you want. Maybe you want to use the spiked shields on the heavy infantry and you don't want shields because you're making archers of the other ones. That's up to you. But you've got lots of different options to play with, which is great for kind of the motley aesthetic of orcs. So yeah, another beautifully done set. I'd like to put some of these figures together in conjunction with the heavy infantry, or the standard infantry sprue that we just looked at, and I want to show you just how interchangeable some of these bits are. All right, so here we go. So I've built up a kind of an array of figures for us here, but let's start on the left here. I have 3 that are heavy infantry bodies with heavy infantry bits. So these are just straight out of the box. And yeah, just look how cool this is. They convey just so much movement and ferocity. Kind of an orc berserker there for you. This one again, this is a body and bits straight out of the kit. No conversion work or anything like that. So very well proportioned, really cool looking bits. Same thing here, heavy body, heavy arms, heavy head. This is all from the heavy orc kit. Yeah, I think that's excellent. Now, what I've done here, so these bodies are both from the heavy orc infantry kit, but the arms and heads are both from the standard infantry set. And you can see these bits are perfectly interchangeable. Like there's no cutting or anything required. They just plop right on. So you want to make like a heavy archer there, kind of like Lurtz. There you go. You can do that. Same thing here. This is a heavy infantry or heavy orc body with head and arms and a shield, in this case, from the standard infantry set. So in that case, I made kind of like a heavy spearman. There you go. And then just to kind of round that out, what I've done here is I have 2 bodies from the regular orc infantry set with heads and weapon options from the heavy orc infantry set. So sort of the opposite of what we just did. And you can see some of these bodies actually are already very armored in the standard infantry set. It's like this guy here, you can see the plate that's on his chest kind of matches the plate on his arms. But yeah, there's no issue with just dropping the bits from the heavy infantry set onto the standard infantry bodies. Same thing here, standard infantry body with the heavy arms and head. So there's no proportion issues, no fit issues, nothing like that. So what's the verdict? I think this is my favorite kit of Oathmark's. Yeah, my favorite Oathmark set yet. And I've dealt with all the dwarves, I've dealt with all the goblins. Now these 2 orc sets, I think that they're just getting better and better with each kit that they put out. And I think I'd go so far as to say too, that if you're thinking about picking this box up and you've not picked up the regular orc infantry, I really recommend you get both. And the reason for that is what I just demonstrated, which even if you're going to use them all as heavy infantry, there's enough bits in the heavy infantry box to just take the bodies from the standard infantry set and then drop the heavy arms on them. And you can see that's still a heavy looking orc, right? Same thing here. So even if you're getting both just to use as heavy orc infantry, the amount of like pose variety you'll get. You'll have 10 bodies to play with instead of just 5, and 5 is great to begin with, but 10 is even better. And then vice versa, if you wanted to have some heavier bodies for your regular like spearmen or your archers, again, it just gives you so many options to play with, even if it's just the head options, that I think you'll regret getting one kit and then picking up the other one like down the road. You'll wish that you had both at the same time. So that's my recommendation anyway. So another fantastic kit from North Star. Thank you again to North Star for sending that to us to review. So I've got a few more boxes to open up for us, which you'll see in the coming week and a half or so. So stay tuned for those. As ever, I really appreciate you guys dropping by for this one. And until next time, happy gaming.